Today on Happy Hour, we're going to give you 5 pieces of advice on how to be a Catholic Christian in a secularized world. Join us now. Welcome back to Happy Hour, our podcast for young adults here at the Cathedral of the Most Sacred Heart of Jesus. I'm Rick, your host, and today I have a special guest who has been a special guest one other time before, or one?
No, just once.
Just once?
Yep.
It felt like 2. I guess after today it will be.
Today's the second, yep.
We're speaking it into existence. That's what's happening with that. Welcome, co-podcaster for today. Would you do you mind telling everybody once more who you are?
Yeah, thank you. I'm Jacob. I was here 3 or 4 weeks ago, I think.
Yeah, it's been a little bit, but not too terribly long. By the time this drops, it might be like 5-6 months. I don't know. It won't be that long, I promise. Thanks for coming on today. I love having
happy to be here.
Our special guests, and you got a lot of good things to say in today's topic. Hello. If you're a Christian, if you're a Catholic Christian in particular, today's day can be a little bit difficult to live in outside, when you walk outside of a church door, right? Like you got to go and you got to actually do it, right? Especially in your world.
Are you talking about like my work world or just my age group or?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, all of the above, I guess. Definitely your work world.
Yeah.
Which just please remind everybody what it is you do.
So actually, I think it's a little easier in my work world. I work in healthcare. I work in a hospital. And the specific healthcare system I work in is actually a faith-based community.
Right. That's right.
But
as a whole,
it can be because, just because, some of the nurses I work with, my manager that I work with, some of them do have a faith background. Of course, not every patient that comes in has one.
True.
And that's really where the ministry comes in. It doesn't, working with your coworkers in a faithful manner is part of that.
Sure.
But you're there to serve the people who are sick,
Right.
It's not the healthy who need a physician.
That's right.
But I do find actually that my work environment affords me a lot of opportunities actually to minister to people who sometimes don't hear it anywhere else.
Wow, that's awesome. That's so typically, let's say you're working in the healthcare industry, outside of the confines of like where you're working, the majority of healthcare workers, they're not allowed to minister to their patients. Would that be a fair assumption?
Well, because I don't have a lot of experience in other systems, I can't speak from experience on that, but that's probably pretty accurate.
I've watched TV shows, Jacob. I'm pretty much an expert at this point. And then you're in your age category as well.
That I think is a lot more difficult to manage.
Being a young adult in today's day and age.
Yeah. It's not popular for one.
Right. That's correct.
I feel like now I think I mentioned it last time, I grew up in private school. I went to private school from preschool through high school. So it was very easy to participate in your faith because it's part of your daily life.
Right.
But then, going off to college and then, making new friend groups that did not have the same background as me.
Right.
Is where it started to require a little more effort. To both maintain my own, which to a degree I failed at, but also to live in a way that others can see what I am, who I am.
Yeah.
And, as I've worked, because of, I've worked in a lot of different work environments, not just healthcare. This is just my latest venture, but, working in retail, food service, and all these other places with a lot of people with very, very different backgrounds. It's not talked about really.
Right.
No one mentions their faith,
Right.
I've talked to a couple people about this, how I feel like, and I don't know if you can resonate with this sentiment at all, that I feel like I was raised with the idea that in the public sphere, you don't talk about religion or politics.
Right.
It's not polite per se.
Right.
I don't know if that's a Southern thing. I don't know if that's a millennial thing. I
think that's a United States thing for sure. I've lived in quite a few states, and it's the same no matter where you go.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I would say, too, that's an excellent point, because if we're believers, and if we really believe that this is the most important thing in the history of mankind, right, our faith, why don't we talk about it? What is stopping us? I think there's a few things. I don't think there's any one thing in particular, but definitely disagreeing with people and having a confrontation in a way. Confrontation isn't always bad. Confrontation is actually very good. It can be very healthy. Jesus was confronting people all the time, even his close personal friends. He confronted Peter often. Like, read the scriptures. He does it often. He confronted people who were needed to be challenged. And I think a lot of times we need to be challenged. So I thought today we'd be able to help people with the conversations a little bit. Maybe give them like 5 tips and tricks on how to live your faith, maybe a little bit more, out in a secularized world. Are you ready for the 5? What we're going to do is we're going to go over 5 one at a time. We'll talk about each one, give each one just a couple of minutes to kind of share with, and then we'll kind of wrap it up at the end. How's that sound to you?
That's perfect.
All right. Ready for tip number 1?
I'm ready. I'm going to make use of these. Here
we go. Number 1 tip I would give is be confident in your faith, right? I think that's we might skip that part sometimes. In a world that doesn't always understand or appreciate our faith, for sure. Remember that our faith is a gift from God, and that it is something that is not just supposed to be cherished by you, but is supposed to be shared. So how do we get confident in our faith? I think there's a couple things we could do. One being, let's study it a little bit maybe. I don't know about you, but I personally know a lot of people whose education in their faith ended at about 2nd grade or maybe 5th grade, right? Because you get the sacraments and it's kind of like, oh, well, did that. Now I need to study math and English and all these other things, or I'm really up to date on YouTube or whatever it is in our world. And we forget that we should be studying our faith. Catechism in a year with Father Mike Schmitz is great. Of course, the Bible in a year.
Yeah, I just started the catechism.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Oh, it's awesome. I'm
only a couple episodes in. But.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. It today was marking like the 1/3 of the way through the year, which is what I'm on. I've stayed steady, but doing things like that, I think, is very helpful. It gives you confidence, right?
Yeah, I think it was actually in the Catechism in a Year, because I was trying to think where I heard this, but I heard someone, it was either a monk or someone mention the difference between reading the Bible and studying the Bible. Because, if you go to Mass all the time, there's not too much of a difference between listening and active listening and reading. That's knowing the Bible.
Yeah.
But there is another level where you actually go and study it and you figure out why these things are the way they are, why they're said, what the context is. And that takes a lot more effort. So it's
for sure
a big hurdle as to why most people don't do it.
I would say too, you have to be humble about it, because no matter how much you study, there's always another question out there that you don't know the answer to, and that's okay. No one is expecting you to have all the answers, right? In fact, I love it when somebody asks me a question about my faith that I don't know, because it first of all, it makes me humble, which is really good for me.
That's just the nature of study.
Exactly.
The nature of the endeavor for knowledge. There's the more you know you don't know.
Yep. The more you know, there's much more out there.
Yeah.
Right. And so, what a great answer we could have for people when they bring up a question we don't know. Wow, what a great question. I actually don't know the answer. Thank you for that question. Why don't we find out together? And now you're on a journey. All of a sudden, and people do have a lot of questions about our faith, Jacob. I don't know if you know this, but there are YouTube channels devoted to, we'll say challenging the Catholic faith. We'll put it that way. I think that was very nice. I think I said it nicely. So
there's just as many apologetic channels too, though.
It's true. And so that would be another route that I would say, get a little more confident in your faith in terms of like knowledge. Scripture tells us we need to have a reason for our hope. right? So if we have that hope, let's give a reason. We don't have to have the fullness of the reason. That's the Lord, right? And he will give that. What we can share is our personal experience. Now the Lord has changed our lives, and we can be confident in that. So when I say be confident in your faith, it isn't confident that you know everything about your faith, but it is confident in the faith that the Lord has given you and that you have attained so far, but always striving for more, right? Okay, so that's tip number one. Done with number one, going on to number two. Ooh, this one, of all the tips, this is probably going to be the most difficult. I'm just going to be flat out honest with you. Be open to dialogue. Ooh, okay, this one's going to hurt a little bit. I did write a little summary of what I meant, so here's what I mean. In a secular world that we live in, it's really important to be open to dialogue with people who don't share our faith, which is a lot of people, FYI. It doesn't mean that you have to agree with everything they say or where they stand or anything like that, but it does mean that you should be at least willing to listen to their point of view, their perspectives, and where they've come from, because that's a reality. Would I like to wave a magic wand and have everybody be exactly where the Lord wants them to be? Absolutely, but we're not autonomous beings, right? We are given a free will, and a lot of people form a lot of their ideas early. And so a lot of that is out of their control in terms of where they are currently. And that doesn't mean we leave them there, but it does mean let's have an understanding of why people believe what they believe. They have had a journey leading them up to that moment, and we forget about that, right? Like sometimes we just think, wow, well, how can that person be like that? Well, let's take a journey through their life. And when you see all that's all in the background, you might go, oh, wow, I might have been that way too, had that happened to me. Does that make sense on that one?
Yeah, no, it definitely does.
Are we open to dialogue? I don't know.
I think most people like to think they're open to it, myself included, and that doesn't necessarily come across in practice. I think, even in conversations with my family sometimes, talking about differences in opinion, my family is very vocal about their opinions, and a little hard-headed too sometimes.
Sure. But you were talking about my family there as you were describing things. Okay.
We have this developed practice now of shouting our opinions at each other.
Gone past the niceties. You did niceties were years ago. We're just now getting the point.
It escalates. It starts out with a question, and then we're all talking over. And there's a lot of us, so everyone wants their voice heard. But,
of course.
But we all. I think we all think we're being open-minded in our discussion. But a lot of times it comes across, I think, more as wanting to be heard than to hear. I think that reminds me of, a line in the Prayer of St. Francis, which is one of my favorite, striving to not to be understood, but to understand.
Oh, I love that.
Which takes a lot of humility as well.
It does. It really does. And I think too, not having your argument ready as they're talking is probably going to be key in this, right? So I like conversations, and I really get into conversations. I love hearing what people have to say, but sometimes I can be really guilty of if they say something I don't agree with, and they're continuing to talk, I've already got it. Oh, I can't wait.
I'm very guilty
I
of
can't
that
wait
as well.
till they're done because I've got this point, and then St. Thomas Aquinas' point on
I've
this,
got three
right? Like
locked and loaded.
exactly.
And I'm just waiting for them to take a breath.
Exactly. And the problem with that, there's a couple of problems. Number one, we stop really listening, right? We because there's stuff that's said that we miss when we're that way. So we stop truly listening. But also, too, we stop allowing the Holy Spirit to be a part of it. Now, yes, apologetics are an important thing. We do need to defend our faith, but we do not need to defend God. God needs no defense. God is God. Nothing we do will enhance or detract the Lord. It just won't. Now, what we do when we do apologetics is we're trying to help somebody overcome their own objections to entering into a relationship with the Lord, right? Their life experiences, things that have happened to them. But it is not The Lord doesn't need us to defend him. He's God, right? But we do need to help people get out of their own way. I think that might be the biggest part of apologetics, to be quite honest, is assisting people to not let things get in their own way of being open to a relationship with the Lord. So tip number 1 was be confident in your faith. Tip number 2, be open to dialogue. Like I said, that's going to be a tough one for us to work on, but we're going to keep pushing on because we got 3 more. All right. Number 3, and this might seem obvious, but I don't think it is. Number 3 is be a good witness, right? Like the best way to share your faith is to actually live that faith. Be kind, be considerate, be compassionate, loving. My goodness, how many times did Jesus speak about loving your neighbor and loving your enemies? Let your actions definitely speak. There are times for words, but the majority of the time it's going to be time for action. Even, and I say this to myself, even when you're driving on the highway, you have to be a good witness of your faith. I don't know if you've ever noticed people that kind of talk one way and live a different way.
Yeah, and I don't think that's always intentional. It's not because it can come across as hypocritical, but I think that's more, and sometimes it is. Sometimes people lie to others and themselves about what their values are, what their virtues are, what they want to be, and they're not quite there yet.
Right.
I'm guilty of that as well.
Sure.
But for me, it's more a sense of I know where I want to be. I know who I want to be. Mm-hmm. I'm not quite there yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
And part of that is because I set my goals so high. I have a very high standard for myself, and I fail that standard all the time. But I think a lot of people they, in a similar manner, they know what they want to be. They know they want to be a kind, loving person. But that's hard.
Mm-hmm. True.
And in the moment, a lot of people take the easy road out. They take the path more traveled, I guess.
Right.
The comfortable one.
I don't think Emerson wrote about that. Was it Waldorf Emerson that wrote the road less traveled? I think so. I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong in the notes. Whitman. That was it. Yeah. You're probably right. I
don't know.
I hope my mom isn't listening. She'll be so ashamed. I apologize, Mom. But yes, I think it's so vital to be a good witness in all moments. I think though, when you're a good witness, that's what transforms people. For instance, I have seen people really act as a Christian under great stress, and I admire that so deeply. I've seen people get yelled at and have received it with love, with compassion, not yelling back, and really being as Christ to the person yelling at them. And I admire that so much. That right there, that kind of witness, that transforms me. Like, I'll follow that. You can say one thing, but you do that, I'm going to follow that. And usually we follow actions, not words, pretty typically. And I'll give you another for instance on this. I know a lot of people who have said, I'll never grow up to be like my mom or like my dad. 20, 30 years later, guess what? You are. Now, those are words, and you probably say those, but you follow actions. You followed what your mom has done, what your dad has done, and you start to emulate those things. So let us keep that in the back of our mind. No, let's keep that in the front of our mind when we're engaging with people, and even when we're not. Sometimes the most impactful things I've seen are when nobody thinks they're being watched, right? Nobody can see it, but you get to witness something like that. Oh, somebody being kind to somebody, just a random act of kindness that isn't for anybody else, but you happen to get a glimpse of it. Oh, those are the best. And that really can affect people. Okay. Tip number 4 is be involved in your community. right? Sometimes I think we try to shelter ourselves away as like we live in some kind of monastery. At least we put our faith in a monastic life where we retreat away and people have to come to us if they want to. No, I think we should be out in the community, out doing things, out bettering our world. And there's a lot of different things that you can be involved in. And I'll let you give a couple of examples of things that either you have been or currently are involved with in the community. But I think when we do that, man, when we're standing alongside, it's not just preaching at somebody. It's, no, you and me, shoulder to shoulder, seeing that there's a need here, and we're going to address it together, right?
Yeah.
You ever been a part of something like that?
Yeah, honestly, I think that is the biggest reason that kind of brought me back to my faith is the community, because I think a lot of other faiths kind of do put that emphasis on a more monastic, not reclusive, but solitary faith experience,
right?
Where it's just between you and God.
Yeah.
Which there is a lot that is just between you and God. But we are, in our church, we are all the body of Christ.
That's right.
And so, I mean, I guess the first thing I went to was a theology talk.
Mm-hmm.
It was one of the Theology on Tap talks.
Nice. So for those that aren't familiar with Theology on Tap, it's where you have a talk on theology, something about God at a bar. I think that's basically sums it up pretty well.
Yeah. It was sometime last year. And yeah, no, I hadn't been to something like that. I didn't know anyone. So it was hard to go, because I was sitting by myself, introduced myself to a few people, didn't really talk much. But then, eventually I came to, here at Sacred Heart, the Chosen Bible study. And that really kind of kickstarted my, delving into the community here. So, then after that, I was part of the Alpha program here. And
now you're part of Bible study. I mean, it's like you put yourself out there, which we have to do at least a little bit. And I think that's one of the more difficult things in today's day and age, especially like post-pandemic and even just young adults as a whole aren't necessarily putting themselves out there in a physical realm. And we do it a lot with social media and a lot that way. We put ourselves out there. But when it comes to actually like being in person and doing that, that's a little bit more difficult. Do you see that?
Yeah. And I think it can definitely be more difficult for someone who's less, and now, I'm an introvert, but I'm a little bit of an extroverted introvert. So I like to go out, get involved, and then reel myself
retreat.
back in. Yeah, I'll recharge and then throw myself back out there again.
Nice.
But not everyone's that way. A lot of people are much more, I don't know how to describe it, but more truly introverted, I guess, or less socially adept, and they don't want to put themselves out there in a physical sense.
Right.
So it can be hard to be a part of community that way. But
and you need that physical. I really think you need that physical encounter. Zoom is great, podcasts are great, all these things are great, but if you're lacking the physical encounter, we're lacking what it really means to be human, right? Because then we're just autonomous and anonymous online. So there's that key component, which is why I say get involved with something. Find something that you're passionate about. If you love animals, go volunteer at a shelter, right? An animal shelter. If you really are passionate about people who are starving, food banks like crazy. There's a lot of ways for us to get involved. Just find what you're passionate about, insert yourself into that thing, and then allow the conversations to move towards your relationship with God. You don't have to force it. Don't go, well, I'm going specifically to the Salvation Army and I'm going to volunteer. I'm going to convert everybody to Catholicism. Probably not a good game plan. But if you do go because you're passionate about it, your heart is for helping people, that is what will change, which leads us to our final tip and trick, Jacob. I can't believe we're here. Number 5. Ready for this one? Here we go. And this is something you can do anywhere at any time. It's pray for guidance. Again, I think we forget this piece frequently. I know that God will give each of us the strength and the courage to live out our faith no matter the challenges that we're going to encounter on that daily basis. But I also really believe that if we're not praying for that guidance, then we're going to create our own guidance. If we're not tapped into what the Lord really wants us to accomplish, we're going to accomplish something, but it's not going to be the Lord's accomplishment. It's going to be ours. And when I do that, it gets ugly real quick. I'm just going to be honest with you. When I try to take over and insert my own, what I want to have happen, inevitably it falls short unless it's in alignment with what the Lord wants to happen. So daily praying for guidance when you wake up. It's Tuesday today while we're recording. Did we wake up and pray for God's guidance today? It doesn't have to be, an hour spent on praying it, but you do have to give some time and you have to listen, I believe, too. Do you ever find that when you are paying attention, praying for guidance, that something stirs within you, or you're moved towards something that maybe might even be not as comfortable, but you kind of feel called to do it? Has that ever happened to you, Jacob?
Absolutely. A lot more recently. And maybe this is just a sign that I need a little more practice with it. I need to put a little more focus on it, but I think it takes a lot of focus. And I think that is why, when I think about all the times that Jesus would remove himself from everything, go off, into the wilderness, into the quiet, with all the distractions, miles away. I think it requires that amount of focus on speaking and listening to actually pay attention to receiving guidance. But yeah, I think when you do make the effort, I think, maybe this is a gift of our bodies that, you do feel, or I do feel, a physical sense of acknowledgement maybe, or a pull in a direction, like you're saying, like a direction to do something. And it's not always, written explicitly, on a piece of paper, like go here, do this.
Right.
But it's more of just knowing, okay, there's something I have to do or something I should not do.
Right. And you don't know unless you're listening. We can talk about it all we want, but if you're not listening, I don't know what to tell you. You know what I mean? And this is the piece that I think we can start to apply right now, right today. Guidance, praying for guidance, allowing the Lord to speak into our lives, what we should be doing. Let's recap for everybody. Do you remember them? Do you remember the 5?
We went through them so quick.
I know, they're fast. Not in any particular order, what do you remember about the 5 tips?
Fourth one was be open to discussion.
Okay.
Third one was be a witness.
Good.
Fourth one was... No, I lost it.
I like it because you already said the 4th one was, and you were going to give a second fourth one. I like it. It's good. We'll go through them real quick. Number 1 was be confident in your faith, right? Number 2 is be open to dialogue. Number 3 is be a good witness. Number 4, be involved in your community. And we remember number 5, pray for guidance. So if we can put those 5 things, if we could start to implement those 5 things, and a couple of them you could do immediately, like right now, listening to this, you're going to start to be the person that inspires you, right? Like you're going to start to emulate those people that you see out there in the world who are actually doing it because they're practicing these things, because they're putting them into actual motion. So let's make a commitment of doing that. Just even for a week. Practice it for a week. See if we could put those 5 things into practice for a week and see what kind of change that will make. So I'm challenging you, Jacob. All 5 things into practice for at least 1 week. I dare say try 2 because it takes a while to form habits, right? I don't know. I see different statistics. Is it 30 days? Is it 60 days? Or is it 90 days that it takes to form a habit? I don't know. Experts say different things. But what I will say is you cannot form a habit if you don't actually do it. So let's dive in and let's do it. That is all of our time. I apologize. I shot for us being done at 30 minutes exactly. We're just a little over. It's not too bad. But I really appreciate you coming on once again, Jacob, being a co-host with me. I hope that we can do it again.
Of course.
Oh, good. Excellent. I never want to assume, but I'm always hopeful.
No, I enjoy being here a lot.
Good. Excellent. And we enjoy our listeners. And we also enjoy when our listeners like, share, and subscribe. That's always a good one too. If you know someone who needs to listen to this is an easy one. Shoot it over to them. Hey, here's 5 tips and tricks of what you're trying to do. Boom, boom. And we do appreciate you very much. And we look forward to seeing you next time on Happy Hour.